Ladies and gentlemen, good evening and welcome to tonight's special City Council meeting and special Committee of the Whole meeting. The special council meeting is called to order. I kindly ask our Deputy Clerk to please take the roll.
Bruno. Burkhart.
Here.
Ruby.
Here.
Kaven.
Here.
Kilberg.
Here.
Kosarog.
Here.
Maladra.
Here.
Marks.
Here.
Mayor.
Here.
Swanson.
Here.
We begin our meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance. I think it's only fair that we ask Mr. Rich Babica, who celebrated a birthday on Saturday, to please lead us in the pledge.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Rich. Ladies and gentlemen, to kick off tonight's special City Council meeting, and indeed just to kick off the evening, the City Council and community will note that the flags on the east lawn of City Hall and, of course, throughout the community are flying at half-staff in honor of the 11 killed in the Star Ballroom Dance Studio in Monterey Park, California. For all of you, a letter has been sent under my signature to Mayor Henry Lowe of Monterey Park, California, to express our condolences and to let him know that we are thinking about he and the 60,000 people that called Monterey Park home. So if we could just have a moment of silence, I would appreciate it very much. Thank you all very much. We have a brief agenda this evening at the special City Council meeting. It is to consider an ordinance requesting the transfer of property from the Geneva Public Library District to the City of Geneva, Illinois, pursuant to the Local Government Property Transfer Act. Is there a motion? Mr. Marks makes the motion. Seconded by Mayor. Ms. Dawkins?
Sure. So as you may be aware, the city and the Geneva Library District have had discussions regarding the status of the former Geneva Library building. And we've also had discussions amongst ourselves about facility planning. So at this point, what is before you this evening is an ordinance that would essentially ask the library to sell the building to the city. We've talked about a purchase price of $450,000. All this does is ask the library if they would be willing to enter into a purchase agreement to sell the building to the city under the Property Transfer Act, which requires this ordinance. If this council passes this ordinance this evening, then on Thursday evening, the library would pass a similar ordinance, or it might be a resolution on their side, but that would say, yes, we're interested in talking to the city and selling the building to the city. And then at which point then we would enter into an actual purchase agreement. So tonight is literally just the first step in kind of putting that in forward motion for the city to have those conversations, enter into a purchase agreement, and then from there it's like a typical real estate transaction. You would go through your due diligence process and you would have a closing and all of those things. So if there's any questions, I'm happy to entertain those.
Any questions for Ms. Dawkins relative to the ordinance drafted which appears before you? Seeing none? Sensing none? Ms. Fernari, please take the roll call.
Burkhart?
Aye.
Ruby?
Aye.
Kaven?
Aye.
Kilberg?
Aye.
Kosarog?
Aye.
Maladra?
Aye.
Marks?
Aye.
Mayor? Aye. Swanson?
Aye.
With 9 votes in the affirmative, 0 votes in the negative, and 1 absent, this item has been approved by this special City Council. With that, ladies and gentlemen, there's no additional business for this evening. I would entertain a motion to adjourn the special City Council. Mr. Marks makes that motion. All in favor of adjourning the special City Council, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned. Just take 30 minutes to transfer over to whenever Ms. Fernari is ready.
Is your volume on your computer? No. Okay, I'm just hearing feedback from somebody's.
I proudly call the special Committee of the Whole meeting to order. Let the record show that all the council members are present, save for Alderman Bruno. Item A in tonight's Committee of the Whole meeting is a presentation on the recommended updates to the City of Geneva Personal Policy Manual. Mr. McCready is with us tonight. Welcome, sir.
I'll dive right into things here. I have a short
presentation here for you this evening where I hope to give you kind of the lay of the land, give you some background information about why we're talking about this. And the Personnel Policy Manual is a very substantial document for the City of Geneva. And so for tonight, while there are several updates, legislative, cleanup, otherwise, that we are looking to make to this document, there are also some key policies and key changes that I'd like to present, a very high-level approach to them, and gauge the City Council's interest, respond to any questions you may have, but really know how we might have to fine-tune some of these policies before you come back to see the final version of it. So, let's talk about our introduction to the city's Personnel Policy Manual. Besides being a very long document, this provides a day-to-day guidance for compliance with regulations, state statutes, the equitable administration of our benefits throughout the city, our compensation plan, and it really helps define that employer-employee relationship. It enables us to recruit, hire, train, pay, and retain a highly skilled workforce so that the city may effectively serve the residents of Geneva. And so let's talk about some of the items that we're going to progress into here. And first of all, before I do that though, the Personnel Policy Manual, contained within it, it's more than just language. It is the nuts and bolts which really drive the day-to-day operations at the city. It describes the process. It describes the way of going about requesting accommodations. It describes the information of how we deal with short or long-term vacancies or short or long-term disabilities. It really provides the information an employee or the employers, such as Mara Johnson or myself, need to understand how we go through different processes with employees. And more so than just talking about how we do pay or how we do benefits or how someone's onboarded to the city, it also helps us address topics of ethics, of travel. There's many different areas that this touches. So let's take a snapshot here just to give you some guidance on where we're at right now as a city. In the current budget that we have roughly 155 full-time positions, and again, tonight we'll focus on the City of Geneva, not TRICOM. We're looking at our Personnel Policy Manual. And just this graphic up here gives you an idea of where those employees are based at in the city. In addition to the 155 employees that serve the City of Geneva in a full-time role, we do have roughly 68 part-time positions that are authorized. That's reflective of interns, seasonal employees, and roughly 50 paid-on-call firefighter positions. I don't know if we've ever had a full 50 of those staffed ever, but we do have 50 available positions should need be in that paid-on-call role. Some of the other part-time positions that you may recall from looking at the budget. We have had a receptionist, we have a videographer who's here with us this evening, we have part-time roles in the finance department as well as the police department, and that would include your part-time records clerks as well as crossing guards. So, why are we talking about this? First of all, human resources has been busy. What you're going to see on this chart, the gray bars indicate how many employees have been onboarded onto the city total. That's inclusive of your part-time employees every year. The solid color below it gives you an idea of how many full-time employees have come on to the city in a given year. We are on a path to have the largest number of new full-time hires join the city than any time in the last 10 years. So we've had 19 employees onboarded year to date. That's since a 5/1/2022 date. And of those, I believe right now we're sitting right about 11 or 12 of those have been full-time. I can tell you this is what's been posted into our system when I pull that data. There are other employees who already have dates scheduled to do their onboarding. There are employees who have been hired, so I already know that number is going to go up. So why are we hiring people? Why are we seeing this trend? Well, turnover happens for many reasons at the City of Geneva. Career growth, some people do leave the city to seek supervisory or management positions, and larger organizations an opportunity presents itself. Sometimes it's a quality of life decision for some employees. Some people who live farther away have an opportunity that pops up and they're able to avoid a commute, and it makes sense for them. Other times it is about that career growth and compensation, and other times it's natural. It's planned. It's things we see coming with retirement. And so speaking of retirements, just to give you an idea of where we're at, this graph represents the percentage of employees who are eligible for retirement in the fiscal years ahead. So in our current fiscal year, we're finishing about 18% of our city's workforce is eligible to retire. That is, they could walk in tomorrow and say, I have contacted IMRF, I am contacting IMRF, I have contacted the Police or Fire Pension Fund, I am ready to retire. Thank you for everything Geneva's done. And you can see that grows up to 32% just in the few fiscal years ahead of us. And I want to clarify, this isn't just this is the bare minimum. This is the bare minimum of those who are eligible to retire. This is those who meet the age requirement and the service requirement to retire. There are other employees who will cross that threshold and would be eligible to retire. Now, granted, their retirement benefits may be impacted, but that's the bare minimum. It could be a greater percentage. Just to give you an idea, I believe that number is about 47 potential retirements, 47 individuals. And that doesn't include the other types of turnover that we've talked about. That doesn't include involuntary or other voluntary turnover where someone might be recruited elsewhere. So what's driving some of these changes? There's a lot of different forces and factors that influence these decisions. Push-pull factors for attracting and retaining good employees. Just to give you an idea and just to look at it there right now, thinking about the environment that we have out there, what's driving these decisions for people? Well, COVID had a big impact on that. COVID changed the way that people look at their relationship with their employer. Not just their employer, they look at their way they look at their relationship with work. Technology is changing that. Employees who may not even be seeking something are being passively sought out, are being identified elsewhere and being recruited. Technology makes it possible for some of these employees to look at working from home, look at working from home on a regular basis or nearly full time. Family changes on both sides of the spectrum. Sometimes people have family members that need to be taken care of or have medical issues. Other times it's growing families and it changes the dynamic of how much time people are willing to spend at work. And of course, another big topic that's come up too is just wellness. In general, people are giving more thought to how work affects their mental health and wellness, and it's a topic that drives some of these changes. I will say though, for us, it's increasingly an employee-driven market right now. Employees have options available to them. I think it's been said here before, when Mara and myself and our administrative services team start looking to see what's happening out there, it's not just about our comps anymore, it's also about our competitors. It's looking at seeing who is competing for top talent at the City of Geneva. And I'll say too, some of these changes, as much as we hear them sometimes, it's less about generational differences. This isn't necessarily about millennials or boomers or Gen Xers, but there are some core shared desires. There's common ground in what people are seeking. So where do we get this information? How do we figure out what's going on? There's a number of sources that we have available to us as we started looking into the city's personnel policy manual. Our city, we conduct exit interviews with nearly every single employee who exits. It's our chance to hear what went well for them, what can be improved for them, and it's also key to helping us identify what key factors do we need to look for in the person who replaces them. We do employee surveys. That's another item out of the city's strategic plan that we've done in the past. It's been a very comprehensive effort. We've had great participation with that, but we've also taken time to read through not just the data, but through all the written comments for key themes and try and understand what our employees are looking for. Employment negotiations are another area where we get a good feel for what people are asking for. That could be collective bargaining, or that could be just simply when we're extending an offer to someone. What do they come back and ask us for? Employee inquiries. Believe it or not, every now and then an employee does raise their hand and comes and schedules time with HR or myself or the city administrator, and asks questions about, why is the policy the way it is, or can there be an exception to this policy? Have you given any thought to modifying this policy? We hear a lot of good ideas that get brought forth to us. I mentioned that we have comparables and we have competitors. Other sources would just be myself, the HR generalist, and other employees. We subscribe to different professional organizations and publications, and we're constantly looking through those, looking for what is the current trend and what is the best practice. And then, of course, we have opportunities to attend seminars, conferences. We get regular legislative updates that tell us how the environment's changing. And I want to say that's another key item to stress. Legislative updates. For as much as this is about being proactive and trying to look at how our policies impact employees, sometimes the choice is not necessarily ours. Sometimes the choice is made in Springfield, and we are simply trying to make sure that we are updating our policies to ensure the city is insulated and the city is compliant with legislation. So, as a public sector employer, you may be familiar here, but we've traditionally had limited tools at our disposal. Long has our refrain been the intrinsic value of work, the pension system, the stability of work, meaningful work that's available, the reliability of work, competitive pay, and the value of this has definitely not diminished. New and veteran employees are increasingly prioritizing, though, workplace culture, the work environment and the facilities that they work within, training and growth opportunities, the mission and values of an organization, non-monetary benefits, and then, of course, workplace policies like flexible work hours, remote hybrid options, access to paid leave, and time away from work just to disconnect. And I mentioned as well that there is passive recruitment, there's word of mouth recruitment, and these can all lead to turnover. And when policy is not consistent with what the market is doing, that certainly contributes to the city of Geneva losing talent. So what's the impact and why does this matter? Well, first of all, turnover has a very real cost to the organization. It does take time and resources to train and develop new employees. Work has to be absorbed. When someone is gone, that work has to be absorbed by the existing team. We lose organizational knowledge when people leave. When people leave unexpectedly, that walks out the door, and sometimes we have a limited amount of time. I don't know what that was. Yep, time's up. Thank you. We have a limited amount of time to try and capture that knowledge from them, and also to train someone to take their place. It disrupts processes that are already in place. It disrupts teams, and it disrupts service. Redeploying services, going through the security checks, setting people up with insurance, processing paychecks, pension participation, all of this is impacted. Every bit of planned and unplanned turnover has a real cost to our organization. So let's talk about some of the major updates that I started with this evening. Now, I would clarify, though, we do have a strong history at this organization of regularly updating our policies, not just for legislative compliance, but looking at what we need to do to keep our policies consistent with what employees are seeking and what it takes to be competitive in this market. So I mentioned there's many reasons that we might do these things: legislative, regulatory changes, changes in staff and structure, and of course, best practice. Some of the ones that you're going to see here this evening have primarily focused on flex time and telecommuting, what I'm going to call a family care pilot program, and also looking at the way we administer vacation and paid time off here. So we've all lived through the last few years. Flex time and telecommuting are certainly words that you're familiar with. COVID-19, that era, was an opportunity for us to actually have a trial run. More so than probably any time in recent history, we had employees who, on a very quick basis, and first of all I want to say thank you to Pete Collins and Mitch Radman for their on the fly, as we saw that coming down the pipeline, getting umpteen different laptops, remote setups ready for employees. There was a day several years ago when this room was filled with these tables and just laptops lined up being ready to be deployed. Wasn't something we've ever done before. But again, we had that opportunity for a trial run. Out of that opportunity for a trial run, there was a few things that came out of that. We adapted City Hall hours when we reopened, and that was done with employee input in 2021. The ability to flex time is something that we have now to some degree, but additional guidance is certainly necessary. This flex time telecommuting, it's went from really being a benefit or something that's out of the ordinary to being something that's more the norm. And I will say, certainly being something that's increasingly expected of employees that are interviewing with us. Mayor Johnson, I believe, is here this evening. She can tell you in her interviews how many times does that question come up when someone is, before they even made it in the door to interview. I want to know what your policy is on flex time. I want to know what your policy is on work from home. And I'll say, too, this isn't just about right now responding to a post-COVID world, if we're in such a thing, but it's also looking at the different nature of work that we have. Increasingly, especially all across the organization, we have more thinkers and less clerical workers here. More and more of our work is being done on a computer and something that can be done remotely and something that requires a high degree of being able to analyze information quickly. I mean, we're increasingly a technology-driven workforce. Yep, I got a little bit ahead of myself. So essentially what we're proposing is looking at a formalized policy that gives employees a clear process for requesting to and from their department heads how to go about this. The idea of incorporating a formalized policy on these topics into the personnel policy manual will help departments make operational decisions. When doing such a thing, our approach to this is, of course, to prioritize the business needs and operations of the department or division first. From our standpoint, arrangements is more than a work-life balance discussion when you look at these things. There's also a degree of enhancing or maintaining productivity in different departments. And any such policy is something that has to be mutually agreed upon by the employee and their supervisor. But this is certainly a non-monetary benefit that would help make the city of Geneva an employer of choice when people have options available. And I will just add, in our research, looking at some of our publications, one of the crazy statistics I came across was jobs and organizations that are able to advertise remote work as an option receive up to 300% more applications than those that do not. So that's one area that we're looking to adapt some new policies, adapt and formalize. The other big one I mentioned was a family care pilot program. This is a benefit that is increasingly found in the public sector at all different levels, state, county, local governments from coast to coast. And I want to clarify, there's probably a lot of misconceptions and there's probably a lot of things you've heard about it out there. It's certainly been in papers around here, if you recall. City of Chicago obviously has a program, State of Illinois has some resources in place, City of Naperville has something, but there's other cities like Macomb, Glenview, Niles, and Glencoe that have put things in place as well. So when we talk about this program and this type of benefit, this certainly shouldn't be confused as a substitute for sick leave, if you will. Organizations that are providing this type of leave have established eligibility requirements and may offer anywhere from 2 to 12 weeks of paid leave. Some private sector providers offer much more, but generally 2 to 12 weeks. You can find it all between that range in the public sector and local government. And the key thing to think about here is, I've got some of the bullet pointed types of things that this might address for someone, but it works in conjunction with other paid leave that an employee may have. So essentially, you're talking about not supplementing, but having a bank of leave available for certain types of things that may come up in life, and having an employee go through a process to access that. It's not you just say, I want to take it. There is a process in place in the organizations that have adopted it. So staff has spent some time looking at what other cities have done. And right now we're recommending looking at this from a pilot type program. I'm going to go a little bit further into this here. So what does a family care program do? Well, there's many purported benefits of it. Pay equity, reduced sick leave utilization, making yourself an employer of choice, overall health and wellness of employees, lowering turnover costs and reducing costs. Many of the items that you might find associated with it. But I will say too, it's often what's characterized as a low cost, high benefit policy. So looking at the program, a pilot program would apply to unrepresented employees with at least 1 year of service at the City of Geneva. I mentioned that it works with FMLA leave, but it does not extend FMLA leave. Employees would only be eligible once in a 12-month period. It does require documentation to verify eligibility. Our pilot program, we propose allowing employees to access up to 2 weeks of paid leave. And I will say, just based on some of our estimates so far, estimated cost, just looking at childbirth or that type of adoption or something like that alone, estimated cost annually between $14,000 and $22,000 in payroll. Now, you'll notice that I said family care leave. So as we discussed this program and as we looked at this as a team, we think about equity, we think about the organization, and we think about the employees we have and the employees we don't have. So under the Family Care Pilot Program, employees, and I often refer to this as being at the bookends of life. If someone who is maybe dealing with another FMLA leave type situation of taking care of an elderly parent, being the primary caregiver for someone who unexpectedly have a medical need, this would be something that they could access that type of leave for. I will say many cities in Illinois, it's a split. Some cities have done, and again, there's a very small sample size here, but some cities have done this where it's been extended to multiple situations, and others have adopted such a thing where it is focused solely related to birth of a child or a growing family. From our standpoint, we saw value in looking at the program more holistically and looking at both kind of, again, the bookends of life, where people might be needing to find a sudden need for some unexpected time away from work. Okay. One of the other items that we've been looking at is looking at our vacation and paid leave policies. One thing that's increasingly clear to us is we can no longer operate on a longevity approach to earning time and being able to get time off in an organization. It is one of the first questions asked by nearly every potential employee. Frequently mentioned in our new hire surveys and our employee surveys. This topic right here, I mean, we get more questions on this than almost anything else. I will mention as well, the ability to have flexible policies related to leave is definitely one of the things that have been reported by the Government Finance Review recently as one of the top 3 drivers of job satisfaction. What were the other 2? Job security and insurance. So, diving a little bit deeper into this, what we're proposing doing with our personal policies is reducing the wait time to access vacation leave by roughly 50%. So, at the City of Geneva, if a new employee comes on board tomorrow, they have their anniversary date and they start accruing paid vacation leave. At their 1-year anniversary, that accrued balance becomes available for them to use as vacation leave. So, the Cliff Notes version of it, in my first year as an employee, this is about me, in an employee's first year, they would not have access to paid vacation leave until they get to the 1-year mark. So you can imagine the scenarios that come to mind when we're hiring people. I'd love to join the City of Geneva, but I'm moving my son into college later this year, and I needed 3 days to travel to California and back. Can I get some time off? I'd really like to join the City of Geneva, but we have a planned cruise for 2 weeks this year. What can I do during that time period? I can give you any number of examples. What I can say is we always work with our employees. We do have voluntary furlough and other leaves, other ways we can be creative, but we're still limited by what tools we have in the personnel policy manual. And I will say when our response is that you can take unpaid furlough, there is another employer out there saying, I can give you paid leave. So what we essentially looked at doing, looking at some of our competitors and some of our comparables, was when an employee gets to the 6-month mark, giving them a prorated 50% balance for the remaining 6 months. So essentially, if I could earn 2 weeks in a year, I'd get to the 6-month mark and have 5 days available to use for the rest of the year. Now again, this is one policy we're talking about here, and there's a few other layers to paid leave here that I want to explain. One of the other ones is, of course, this next one here, which is reducing the wait to use personal leave from 90 to 30 days. So that is one of the things that when you join the city of Geneva, and again, for an unrepresented employee joining the city tomorrow, after 3 months, you would have access to 3 personal days. We were proposing to lower that down to 30 days. So after your first month here, you immediately have access to 3 personal days. Then you're looking at getting to the 6-month mark and getting access to another 5 days. And then the third component of this is really looking at carryover. So for the city of Geneva, and I will say we have a very strong culture of encouraging employees to take their paid leave time. Supervisors are reminding employees constantly, here's where your leave is, here's what balance you have, and you need to take your leave. It is not the norm, it is the exception to carry time over at the city of Geneva. What I will say though is, especially when you look at employees who might be in that first year, they might not be able to burn it all. Or they have to go through their first year. There's other things that happen in life where someone might say, I really don't need to take all my time this year, but next year I was planning to take a little more time for some event or something in life. And there are times just where through luck of the draw or how things play out, maybe weather cancels a trip or something gets called off, COVID cancels along international travel. There's a reason that there's many reasons employees might need to carry over a certain bank of time. Right now, when you need to carry over time, that's something that requires approval. That's something it's a mother may I situation, if you will. May I take time? May I carry this over? And why we strongly encourage employees to use their time during the year for their benefit. There are times when those days need to get carried over to help alleviate some of that administrative burden and try and streamline the process. We were suggesting and recommending that employees be able to carry over 40 hours of paid leave from year to year without having to go through an approval process. Again, ability where if something comes up, they have some discretion of if they want to carry days over or not. That doesn't compound, that doesn't grow over time, but it's simply that employees can carry up to 40 hours at any one time over into the next anniversary year. Let me get back on track here. Why were we looking at these policies? Well, one of the primary drivers of talking about this and looking at these types of changes is being able to compete for talented employees. Why these are changes to what we have traditionally offered, they certainly allow us to leverage our strengths as a public employer by offering these additional benefits or these changes to our benefits. I do believe strongly that these types of changes would help minimize turnover for our organization. And I will say too, when we do this, we don't do so lightly. We look into this and we look for options that not only help us meet these goals above, that are also financially sustainable for our organization. So, in the end though, it comes down to providing reliable, efficient, and excellent service to the residents, businesses, and stakeholders in our community. I'm happy to answer questions and elaborate on any of the topics we've covered tonight. I can go into more detail on some of the concepts or ideas behind them, but really what I was seeking this evening is if City Council has comments, questions, or concerns about some of the topics that have been brought up. That way we're able to go back and fine-tune the language and these policies before they come forth to you as part of a comprehensive update to our city's personnel policy manual. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McCready. As Mr. McCready stated, any CQCs, comments, questions, or concerns from any member of the committee? We're going to go with Mr. Maladra, Ms. Ruby, Mr. Marks.
Just a comment. I haven't been retired so long that I forgot what it was like when I was working. A lot of what you're proposing here is stuff I'm familiar with. In fact, my ability to be on the city council at all was due largely to the fact that my employer had flexible options available to me, as well as they encouraged community involvement. The fact that the current environment almost compels us to do something like this isn't a surprise. I think if we've been looking at the news, business news anyway, every day, we see that it is an employer market and that people feel differently these days about things that used to be commonplace. So I think that this is pretty smart, especially given that it's always been one of our goals to be an employer of choice in our space. So I think this is good. Thanks.
Ms. Ruby?
Thank you. Thanks, Ben. I think this all makes sense. I think this ties in really well and accomplishes a lot of the goals we discussed last week with the compensation study. And just one question on the family care program. Do you know offhand, does that apply to spouses as well?
I think I know what you're asking.
And my follow-up is same-sex marriages. Are those acknowledged?
Yeah, I believe they would be.
Okay.
We were interpreting the language and from many of the examples that we've seen. There's a few different ways to approach that, but in general, you find these types of policies being more holistic than restrictive.
Okay, great. Yeah, just hoping for diverse, inclusive language in that. Thank you.
Mr. Marks?
I see the problem. I really do. But could you go back a couple slides? I just want to clarify in mind. Vacation paid leave.
Yep.
We're looking for material over 40 hours of paid leave.
Mr. Marks, your microphone, sir?
I'm sorry. Thank you. Vacation and paid leave, just looking at the definition, are they the same? Are they interchangeable? Or are they actually separate?
No, that's a very good question to ask. There are different types of paid leave. So we do have vacation leave. We do have sick leave.
Right.
We do have personal leave. We do have safety days. But this is essentially, we're focusing on paid vacation leave when we talk about this.
Okay.
The personal leave that's down there is a separate bank that employees have access to. 3 days.
That's the last one?
3 days. That's a maximum of 3 days.
Okay. All right. Just trying to get the definition
Yes.
straight. I don't disagree with what we're looking at, especially when you look at the previous making people wait a year for vacation. I mean, I can't believe we got away with that this long, to be honest with you. That seems pretty harsh. So, yeah, I mean, my only concern, and I'm not going to be against it, is will this cause more additional work to the people who are still back here? You know, will we be able to balance that, knowing that this is coming up? That would be my only concern. Otherwise, I'm not against it. Don't get me. I'm just trying to clarify it. You know, do we think that's going to cause people who are left behind to have them start thinking I'm overworked?
No, I think
You see where I'm not trying to be critical of it. I'm trying.
no, it's definitely a factor that we looked at as we started running projections to see what would be the impact of this. What's the value of the time we're talking about? And so looking at the number of days that are available, I would go back to that low cost, high impact. When someone's gone, does someone have to cover for that person? Does someone have to answer the phone? Does someone have to take the meeting? Does someone have to reschedule something? Absolutely. But a key part of that policy too is that when we request time off, whether someone's requesting time for me or whether I'm requesting a day off, I work with my supervisor. We work with our supervisors to request time off. If the whole city comes tomorrow and says, we all want to take next Friday off, it's one of the harder parts about sometimes being a supervisor, going through that, is looking at the operational needs of a department and deciding how many people can be gone and still function. We are committed to, we have open hours for our residents, and so that still comes down to, when you look at how many people are here or not here, are we still able to open up the doors? Are we still able to provide that service every day?
I just want to make sure
Absolutely.
we won't lose employees because of doing this. And if you've got that covered, I don't have much issue with this. I think to get the people we want, it's almost required now.
And I will say it's an equation. Alderman Ruby brought up the compensation program, and absolutely. I mean, this This goes with compensation. This goes with workplace culture. This is part of an equation that adds up to being able to attract and retain talent.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Mayor, then Mr. Swanson?
I have a few questions. So the way I understand this is that if somebody comes here, even if they have 10 years of experience somewhere else, they don't get vacation in the first year. Is that?
I will say some things can be negotiated at the time of a job offer being made, but as far as our personnel policy manual stipulates for employees coming on board, we have a schedule where it's very much driven by longevity of how many days of paid leave you're able to earn and have access to annually based on the amount of years of service you have credit for. So sometimes employees have been given credit for additional years, helps them reach a bank, maybe a larger bank of vacation leave at an earlier date. But what I will say is this helps clarify this, and this helps put tools in the toolbox. This gives MERA important tools to use at the time of recruitment, at the time of hiring, as far as being able to craft things and be able to move quickly without seeking additional approvals, without going through processes to try and, maybe do something that might seem minor in the grand scheme of things, but trying to really outline a process for doing it. And again, I'll go back to the start. Part of having these changes then enumerated in the manual is being able to equitably apply them to employees, and so employees know where they stand.
Okay, understood. What percentage of our employees live in Geneva? Do you happen to know?
Off the top of my head, no, but I will say that the vast majority of our employees reside in the Tri-City area here. If you look at, I always think about the
Or on the border,
I think
like
about
you?
standard deviations, and I think when you go to that first standard deviation of where employees are, you're looking at Batavia through St. Charles there.
Okay. The family care pilot program. So, having a little bit of experience with this myself, is it a short-term disability policy that we're buying, or is it a policy of self-pay for this?
We would essentially be providing paid leave for employees. This would be something that they would have to apply for, to access, and demonstrate a need for. This would run concurrent with FMLA, so there would still be a qualifying event.
Mm-hmm.
And essentially what we're saying is, when you look at what FMLA is the right to come back to the job. FMLA is job protection. FMLA is not paid leave. Now, employees who do come on board, especially if you look in the first couple years, like you can save some of your time. Some of the proposals that we're submitting would allow you to bank some more time to cover an FMLA leave as paid leave. This would provide some additional time that could be paid under qualifying circumstances.
Okay. During my short time as a public employee, it was noted that several people, the carryover of hours was almost used as part of their retirement deadline. They could bank unlimited. Do you find other municipalities doing that, or is that more different public sector?
Each public organization, each local government is unique. I will say it's not uncommon to have the ability to carry over some time or have that outlined in your policy manual. I would say probably many of your employees at the City of Geneva who've come from other organizations have maybe had that benefit. And looking at it again, there's amounts where employees can roll time over. There's opportunities where employees can be paid out for time. There's opportunities where people can take unlimited time or 2 weeks. Looking at the way our policies are, and then also looking at the amount of time we provide, much like any contract, we look at the total. What's the total benefit? What's everything else we're providing? So while another city may allow you to carry over 2 weeks, we were starting with permitting a 40-hour carryover.
Okay. Paid leave. I'm sorry, I lost it.
Okay.
I know. What are the for a 10-year employee, what amount of vacation do they get? Is that a standard amount, or does it vary by position?
You've got me stumped on the actual amount. It's probably sitting at my desk. Thank you. After 10 years of employment, 16 working days.
Okay. And that's a uniform thing regardless of position with the city?
For unrepresented employees that are, if you don't have a contract as a collective bargaining group that says otherwise, this is what we would turn to.
Okay. That's all I have. Thank you. This was very interesting.
Mr. Swanson, sir.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for the presentation. I like being more flexible with the employees and certainly for a very low cost. I just wanted to confirm the cost for the family care. I think you said 14,000 to 22,000. That's citywide.
Yes.
All in.
That was looking at, again, looking at a pilot program, focusing on unrepresented employees, looking at what that would be.
Okay.
So part of our analysis was looking at just on a childbirth or adoption, we're looking at multiple sources of information, trying to figure out how often does this actually come up at our organization in a year. And so looking at what the averages were, and fortunately, and partially because we're a data-driven organization, looking back in time and looking to say, how many of these events can we confirm happened? What was 2 weeks? What was the value of those 2 weeks? What would we be talking about?
And then you also said that you were looking at it as a pilot program, and I was wondering what do you mean by that, and what would you change, or how long would this pilot be?
Pilot program, we'd bring it back, seeking authorization, probably looking at a 2-year timeline to see how this goes and evaluate it in between. With that pilot program, that had to be this is a significant change. Why I will say it's not quote unquote bleeding edge, but it is, we'd certainly be maybe one of the earlier adopters of it. But this gives us an opportunity to confirm what is that impact going to be to the organization. If we find that it's having adverse effects, we might have to take a harder look at it. But before we enshrine it in city policy as something that will be more permanent, if you will, we want to make sure that we look for anything that we might encounter that was unanticipated. Is there a certain situation it doesn't cover? Is there a certain situation that now it's being used for that it wasn't intended to? But before we finalize it, we really want to make sure that we have something that works for the city of Geneva.
So the pilot would be looking at it both ways. Either this is not right for us,
Yeah.
or it was detrimental, or perhaps we could expand it.
Absolutely.
Not cap it at 80 or
Yeah.
what have you. So I like that. And my last question, the vacation and paid leave, you did not give a dollar amount. I'm guessing it would be rather negligible, what your anticipated impact would be.
I can get that for you.
Okay.
I do not know it off the top of my head right now, but we had looked at that, and again, it was nothing where we were balking at that or thinking that it was going to be financially cumbersome to the organization.
Okay. Would it be safe to assume that it would be less than the family care?
Essentially, it's hard to clarify because you're looking at, if we're just talking about the amount of time employees can get as a new employee, it's relatively small. We're looking at the value of time in someone's first year of employment and having access to up to 5 days of vacation leave that they essentially have a 6-month window to burn or carry over. And so you can look at it that way, or you can look at the cumulative cost of, what if someone always has 5 days extra in their bank when they leave. But the risk of that and the potential for someone to have 5 extra days in time and then leave the city without using it was negligible. I should say negligible is not the right word. I think everything has a cost, but certainly the benefit it would provide far outweighs that.
Understood. Okay. Thank you very much.
Mr. Kosarog, then Mr. Caven.
Thanks, Ben. I think this is great. I love being on the forefront of this, and I would even encourage us to continue to, and I'm sure you guys are doing this, but bring it to us to share more ideas in future years and whatever the market's bringing, because I think this is critical to staying competitive. Some of my questions are really maybe just more for me and understanding it, but if kind of taking from your introduction, if somebody's recruited outside from Geneva to another city, did that impact their IMRF at all?
No, they have IMRF service, so if they're a vested employee, they continue to be vested at the other organization.
Okay.
they're at.
So it doesn't affect that. I was wondering, certainly there was plus and minuses, I'm sure, during telecommuting during COVID. What were maybe some of the struggles or some of the challenges?
We had a quick deployment, and so at the time, we were not actively, we did not actively have many of the things you're familiar with now. GoToMeeting, GoToWebinar. We didn't have active accounts for those services pre-COVID. We didn't have an organizational-wide Zoom account. So some of it was getting used to technology and trying to learn it quickly. Pete and Mitch will tell you too. I mean, some of the first meetings we did, we would take notes and say, I know I sat on a Zoom where I was able to type things in and people could respond to me, but we couldn't do that in ours. Where is that setting? Where is that checkbox? And so they would have to go back and do some hunting and some Googling and checking with peers to see how do we learn how to use this most effectively for a public meeting. I'll say we were definitely not the only local government trying to figure out how do we make Zoom work for a city council meeting. Some of the other things we had happen too, and this will get into my next part of the presentation this evening. I think that's it, right?
I think it's time for my medication.
Yes. We are trying out new technologies, so our phone system, things like that. Obviously, one of the things we didn't do is we didn't give every employee a desktop phone to take home with them. Phones work through the internet. You can have your phone ring at your desk, but of course now we need maybe equipment that we didn't have before. So we have to start testing out. Does everybody's earbuds that came with their phone plug in and work with your laptop? Do you need a better webcam? Do we have, and now part of our standard deployment is, of course, when we look at laptops, is making sure that there is a webcam in them. So we're really pivoting to a world where we can be more flexible. That was many of the things that we encountered with quickly responding to a world where people are working remotely.
Yeah, I totally agree with, wow, that's never been that loud. If somebody's working on a presentation at home, I don't see why they couldn't be, why they couldn't be doing that at home instead of at the office. And if that allowed them some flexibility, I'm all for it. I was wondering what we currently allow for maternity, adoption, expanding family, as you said. I know FMLA, but do we offer any paid leave for that?
The employee would have access to the paid leave they currently have in their banks.
So just their vacation, personal
Their
days,
paid leave
whatever.
they currently have earned and have access to, whether it's sick, whether it's personal vacation time, that is what you would have available.
Okay. So this is completely new as
This
far
would be-
as, I get sort of the
would be-
taking care of your family part, but I wanted to make sure that I was clear that it was brand new for just growing families.
Yes, it would be brand new in that situation, yes.
You said that you're suggesting we carry over the personal leave from 90 to 30 days? I'm sorry, the banking from one year to the next. What are we at now? How many hours can you roll over to the next year?
Right now, so a couple of things I want to clarify. So first of all, the 90 to 30 days, that's on getting access to your personal leave.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. Yeah,
So
that was my
just
confusion.
to clarify, every city employee covered by this personnel policy manual, you would, after 90 days, you have access to 3 personal days. In my first year here, after three months, I had access to 3 personal days. Everyone behind me, I believe, would have had the same situation. So we're just saying reduce that amount of time to the 30-day mark. And then the other part of it, if I heard you asking about, was reduce that wait time to access vacation leave. At the 6-month mark, this would be new, you would be given access to, you would be awarded, earned 5 days of vacation leave. And I want to say something else here that I kind of glossed over earlier. When this journey started, when we started looking at this idea of giving access to leave earlier, this was looking at being a competitive employer, being able to recruit people, being able to keep people who are here. being able to look employees in the face and say, you know, if these situations come up, here's what you'll have access to, and it being reasonable. Since that time, and pending right now in Springfield, is actually a bill that would require,
Governor's desk.
on the governor's desk, yes. On the governor's desk, waiting to be signed, that would require, effective January 1st, 2024, for all employers to be providing access to 40 hours of paid leave in someone's first year of employment. So this has another added, you know, you could check this in the unfunded mandates column, but this has legislative implications as well. So the changes not only help us be better recruiters and attract and retain talent, it also keeps us compliant with current legislation.
I was actually asking, I'm glad you clarified that though, thank you, and I am familiar with that, that bill on the desk, governor's desk, but I was asking about the carryover.
Here, okay.
How much can they carry over now? And then post, it's gonna be 40 hours.
So that can be done by request. And what I'll say is, while each situation is unique, it's probably usually smaller increments.
So 0 though is the answer.
So right now, our policy says that you're supposed to use your time in your
Oh,
year.
wow.
Again, I'll say, it's part of a culture too, I think, of encouraging employees to take their time off. I mean, someone who's rested, someone who's refreshed has immense value, not only to themselves, but to the organization. We want people to take their time off. We want people to get out of the office and disconnect. If you ended the fiscal year, or I'm sorry, if you ended your anniversary year and you still had some time left over, we certainly do have a smaller percentage of employees who ask to carry 1, 2, 3, maybe a few more days over. But in general, what I would say is the practice is for very few days to be carried over from one anniversary year to the next.
Yeah, again, I think we should definitely allow them to carry over some days. I do 3 at my work. 40 hours seems like a lot. My employees would love that, but if 40 is what you think is good for
I
a
think
municipality,
I think for an
then-
organization that hasn't had this, and for looking at this holistically of everything else we do, I think this makes sense. I think this is reasonable. And I want to go back to something else to say. You know, we talk about carrying time over. On the flip side of it, something that Mara, myself, the administrative services team look at, if an employee is getting deep in the fiscal year and has not taken any time, that's a cause for us to reach out to. That's a cause for us to remind their supervisor, remind their department of, you have an employee who's got 12 vacation days that they haven't taken, and their anniversary's next month. Is there a plan for them to take that time off? Is there something we don't know about? But we want them to take that time off.
I agree. And again, do the same, constantly remind them, take it. You can only get 3 days. So I think my last, I love the family care program. I think it's great. I can't imagine, but once you give a brand new benefit, really, you can't take it away without upsetting people. So, you know, I'm not sure what calling it a pilot program really means, because it's not like after the first year you can be like, okay, now we don't offer it anymore, and everybody's like, well, my family's having struggles now, and now it's gone, you know, but somebody last year could take it. So I'm fine committing to it, though. I'm not sure what the pilot program really means in that regard.
Our hope in it being a pilot program was, you know, and again, I'll say I'm certainly optimistic that it will work for our organization. But also looking at a pilot program of being able to get 12 months in and report back to you of, here's what the utilization has been. Here's how it's impacting people. And here's how we may want to tweak it or change it before we finalize it in the policy.
Okay.
That was the intent of having a pilot program.
Again, I think it's great. I love being on the forefront of this stuff, and I really hope it helps Mara and you get our positions filled. Thank you.
Mr. Caven, sir.
Thank you. First of all, thank you for the presentation. I think you've got a lot of really good things that you were able to present about. And I think a lot of these, or at least in my experience, a lot of the things that you have listed off are pretty common in a lot of different organizations. So I think it's definitely a good idea for the city to move that direction. And this might have been kind of what Mr. Marks was asking before, but since we've hired so many new people, let's say that this is approved and it moves forward. What if we have a group of employees that started a month or a month and a half ago, before this was approved? Is there a way to include maybe people that fall into that window that just started as well, so they don't feel like, oh man, I started a month too early, now anybody else who comes gets this, but not me?
I think, with many times with policy changes like this, it is looking at a date and time where things change, but I think it's certainly a reasonable question for us to explore of what would be the impact of an implementation of who might be caught in the middle
Okay.
there.
For my opinion is people that fall into that, and again, since it starts at 6 months, I mean, we're not talking about a ton of people, but I think that an employee who started in that time frame should be considered if this goes forward as well, at least my opinion.
Yeah, I think that's a reasonable ask, and that would be what we would do. I mean, it's kind of like the whole grandfather, but you're not grandfathering, but it's the same idea. If there's a benefit that's available tomorrow but wasn't available yesterday, you should certainly be able to take.
Thank you.
Mr. Kilberg and Ms. Burghardt?
Three quick ones, because I know we've got other things to cover here yet tonight. But first of all, an implementation date, I know that's going to have to come back to the council. The earliest implementation date would be this spring?
Yeah, I'd say yes.
Okay.
I think we need
That's good.
to go back just based on what we've heard and
Good.
fine tune a few things for you.
And then I assume that all the department heads have given thumbs up to this and are supportive of the
Yeah, we've as a group of department directors, we have looked at this. Again, this is something that Mayor and I had worked on and spent many meetings and hours looking at this. Spent time with the department directors, spent time with the city administrator, looking at the concepts and looking at these changes.
Good.
So it's
good.
Yeah.
And then I agree. I think the cost benefit is there, and I think we need to move it with all haste. So that's all.
Ms. Burghardt?
Thank you, Mayor. Thanks, Ben, for a great presentation. I really appreciate all the data you brought to support this. I am a public employee, so I am very familiar with all of this, and I know the struggles that all public employers have in trying to recruit right now because remote work has just not been part of the culture. So could we go back to that slide about the telecommuting, you called it?
Yeah, let me think about right here.
And I think about this a lot because we're in an organization where there are people who cannot telecommute. Police officers, firefighters, public works, and I guess people go into those professions knowing that that's probably part of the job. But are there, I think we do have a great culture here, and so I want to figure out however we can continue to balance that to make people not feel, angry at their coworkers for a benefit that they can't have. I remember reading a magazine article early when this all was coming up, and they said, well, somebody, a front desk secretary can't telecommute, and so the consultant writing this article said, well, you could have two people split those duties, and so somebody's at the front desk Monday, Tuesday, somebody Thursday, Friday, and they can that. I mean, do you have parameters? Are you thinking like people could work from home full time? Are you thinking 2 days a week, 3 days a week, depending? I want to make sure there's also guideposts for supervisors so that they can.
So that would be included in the full language that would come back in the personnel policy manual. So we would look at those things. We would look at things like what are the core hours of the city. Again, if I tell Stephanie tomorrow I want to start telecommuting from home, but I'm going to work from 6 p.m. until 2 a.m., I'm not available to meet with my coworkers. I'm not available to answer phone calls. I'm not available to attend a meeting. So it's really looking at what are the core hours of that division, of that operation. So that's part of what we're looking to cover. The other thing, and we've had this happen too since COVID, is when we've responded to COVID exposures, or we've responded to employees who have to maybe, they're at home in their basement, for 14 days or for 10 days or 5 days, trying to keep things going, feeling fine, but waiting until they have that all clear. We have had many different opportunities to test. What does this look like when someone's gone for 5 days? Can someone be out for 5 days? And we have a few, situations where someone may be doing it for 1 or 2 days on a regular basis. So again, this really is going to start formalizing something that hasn't had these guide rails to kind of let people know, well, what can I request, or how do I request it? But the points that you're bringing up as far as those concerns, that would be addressed in our final language. Yes.
Good. Yeah, I think that's helpful. And also because some employees aren't as aggressive about bargaining for themselves or speaking up for themselves. So the more kind of that you can make it transparent and let people know what they can ask for. Do you think you'll incorporate anything like you have to be with the city 3 months before you can do remote work? Or, I do think there is a lot of value in being, in person on the job when you're first starting and meeting people.
I think that'd be considered. I think the big thing to remember is you still ask the supervisor. You still have to work it out with your department division. So I think that's a very reasonable thing to ask. If someone's brand new and they say, well, I'm not going to, I want to work remote all the time, there is value to being here. There is training that has to be done. There are things that have to be done in person. So there might be a time where it makes sense to be 1 or 2 days at the start, and as you get further along, maybe you can request additional time.
Okay. In terms of vacation, this really doesn't add more vacation, really. It just allows new employees to have access to it quicker and be able to maybe carry over a week.
Just to be clear, it does add up to 5 days, or I'm sorry, not up to. It provides 5 days of vacation in that first year they normally wouldn't have. So you would still get to your first
10.
year and get your 10 days. You would just have access to 5 additional days that year. And we looked at that in multiple ways, and there's the argument of, well, what if they get access to it earlier? We're essentially then creating a deficit later on where someone's going to get, well, I've been here two years and I've only had 10 days to spread out, and I need a few more days. So we had a lot of deep conversations about that very topic.
Yeah, I think generosity and vacation can really pay benefits, and like we said about, especially if you're getting people mid-career who are coming from a place where they had, it's a shock to the system sometimes to join a public employer.
And also it makes saying yes to your job offer from Geneva a no-brainer.
Yeah, I will say public employers are much more generous with sick time, I think, and that's what, when Amy was talking about carryover, I think that's what a lot of people do is carry over sick time, and that does end up, you can transition, that helps credits for IMRF. So real quick, and I love the carrying over 40 hours, because I think a week, what if I'm getting married next year, or I'm going on a big European adventure, or like you said, moving a kid to college. It's a great way to let the employer be in the driver's seat and kind of give them a little flexibility. So yeah, all this seems great. So thank you.
Miss Mayor.
On the family care program, so do we have, we currently don't have any maternity leave paid.
If you had sick leave banked, or you had other leave,
Okay,
but there's
so
nothing
no
like
special,
this.
no short-term disability that they can access, or any. Okay.
Yeah, coming up there.
So when an employee is having a baby, they have access to FMLA per the federal guidelines. That's 12 weeks of unpaid leave, which we require them to substitute with paid leave. So that's what they use right now. Now, if for some reason they, on the IMRF side, so this is not for police officers, firefighters, with IMRF, if you can go on short-term disability after 30 days. But most employees don't, because they have FMLA and they have sick time and vacation time that they're required to use.
So they'd rather have their full pay rather than going on short-term disability, which is a lesser pay.
Which is 2/3 of your pay.
Okay.
And with IMRF, you have to be unpaid. You have to be unpaid to qualify. There's a 30-day wait period, and then you have to be unpaid. So for example, I've had an example where someone was on maternity leave. They took the full 12 weeks, and at week 10, they ran out of sick time, vacation time, and whatnot. that's when they're like, okay, I'm gonna go on short-term disability
Right.
for 2 weeks. You
And
know.
does that work then?
Yeah, that works.
We have to do the
Yeah,
opposite, I
that,
think.
that works. But with this, you can get 80, you can get 2 weeks paid, you know, and that counts towards FMLA, and then the last 10 weeks you use your sick time, your vacation time, XYZ. So then in that scenario, that employee would not lose any benefit time, they wouldn't go unpaid, and they would be all set to go. So I have not seen anybody use short-term disability since I've
Okay.
been here, just because we have sick time and we require you to use
How
that.
much sick time is it a year?
You get 1 day, you accrue 1 day a month, so 12 days a year.
Okay.
But in order to qualify for FMLA, you have to be here, employed here a year.
Okay.
So what we find sometimes is people get COVID and they've been with us 6 months and they don't have enough sick time to be off. And then they don't qualify for FMLA.
Okay. But we can address those odd situations with.
We do address them. How we've addressed them is you can work remotely
Okay.
if you feel better, so you don't have to go unpaid.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Anyone else from the dais? Again, there's no action being taken tonight. Ms. Dawkins, do you want to add some comment?
Follow up on a quick back of the envelope, trying to count here. It's roughly 38% of our full-time workforce live in Geneva, St. Charles, or Batavia. That would also include Mill Creek, because I just did it by a zip code. If you include North Aurora, Elburn, and South Elgin, you're up to about 52%. So, but keep in mind, Public Works, Police, and Fire all have residency requirements within a radius.
Thank you, Ben, very much.
I'm
Excellent.
gonna stay up here.
Are you comfortable and clear with some of the comments you've received and questions? And
You know, I think the questions have been very insightful. When we bring this back, I'll try and maybe elaborate on a few different things that you've brought up just to make sure that it's clear. But I think this gives our team what we need to finalize this language and get this back to you promptly. So, thank you.
thank you very much. Item B, folks, is continued discussion on recommended fiscal year 24 budget and fiscal year 25 budget projections. Before I turn this over to Ms. Dawkins, I do want to echo a phrase that Mr. McCready used during the onset of his presentation, that is top talent. Tonight we have some of the top talent in the industry with us tonight. We're delighted that you're here, and we look forward to hearing from you. With that, Ms. Dawkins, the floor is yours.
Sure. So last week, it was asked that the department heads give a short presentation on their department budgets. I thought, so for organizational sake, we will go departments as they appear in your budget. So first up is Assistant City Administrator Ben McCready, who is the Director of the Administrative Services Department.
No more slides. Long time no see. All right. So I'm just going to give you some, I think, a very streamlined approach here. Tell you a little bit about what's going on in administrative services in this budget year. As you know, so administrative services consists of our IT division, the human resources division, and our administrative division in those functions. We are responsible for a diverse array of functions that, as I said before, make this organization tick from day to day. Email, cybersecurity, the personnel policy manual, payroll, risk management. These are all different functions that fall under administrative services. And as you might know, as long as we're talking about the budget, strategic planning. Like other city departments, we do not produce widgets. Many of the programs and services we offer are cyclical and follow broader trends. The number of applications we receive, how many positions do we have to fill, what's going on in Springfield or on the governor's desk that require changes on our part. To ensure that we operate at peak performance, our team is constantly looking for opportunities to leverage technology and streamline processes. We look for ways to reduce opportunities for errors in payroll. We look for changes that we need to maintain legislative compliance. Or we look for ways to maximize our own productivity during the day. To accomplish our many tasks, just so you know, we rely on a small but mighty team. There's myself. We have an administrative analyst. We have a receptionist who's a part-time role. We have our HR generalist, Mara Johnson, who's here with us this evening. IT manager, Pete Collins, who you know well. We have an IT analyst, and then of course we have our videographer, who's here with us this evening as well. We have a busy year ahead of us. Many of the projects that we have included in our budget and in our operations directly tie back to the strategic plan goals, specifically looking at areas of strong government and excellent municipal services. And I would say as well, especially some of our items and references to being a data-driven organization. So a few things that are in our budget and that maybe are not reflected in the numbers. Cybersecurity. This remains a very high priority for our organization and for our team. We continue to evaluate and recommend improvements to the way we operate, to the way we use technology, to the way we access our technology here. This is something that is increasingly a priority for us. In the past years and in the years ahead, we continue to utilize different services and programs to test cybersecurity on a regular basis, whether it's email, whether it's network security. And it's not only protecting vital records and personnel records and information, but it's looking at the computers and the technology that's responsible for running our utilities. Our water treatment plant, our drinking water, our electric grid, all of those are very high priorities to keep secure. Some of the other items that are in our budget. Annual computer replacement. Our IT team has put together a very good schedule looking at trying to keep all our computer equipment on roughly a 5-year replacement schedule. It's amazing how much technology changes in 5 years. So this year they are looking at replacing at least 27 different workstations. The vast majority of those are actually across the street in the police department. So they've got 27 workstations there, and we do have some over here that are actually used for some of our own video editing and some of uploading something like this meeting to the internet, to YouTube. Total cost of that is roughly looking at about an $82,000 expense across all multiple funds. When you look at that as well, we are that's not just buying the laptops and computers, but that is looking at the docking stations and the technology and the licensing that goes with each station to make sure employees have the software they need. Another big one that's in there and that our team will be working on is looking at the city's phone system. Just so you know, the city's phone system was originally purchased in 2004. We have seen and we have been tested on it. We had an outage not too long ago that really kind of brought the light of how close to end of life we were for that system. Again, I want to, if I could pat them on the back or give them kudos right now, Pete and Mitch went above and beyond to get that system back up and back running. And in going through that process, we realized how critical it was to have a plan in place to replace that system and to get something put in there before we do have something catastrophic, before we do have something that requires a large unplanned expenditure. In this current budget, I believe we've got about $250,000 budgeted to start that process of looking for a replacement phone system. And this goes back to the question that was asked earlier. This is what lets employees talk and be heard and not be choppy and not have distorted voices when someone's using the internet to communicate from City Hall to their home or to a remote facility or to the water treatment plant. So this would very much help with day-to-day operations. Other things that'll be going on this year as part of our budget and our operations, we're looking at the implementation of the comp study, which will be underway shortly. Depending on the timing of when that final report comes due, we will be looking at how that is implemented across the organization, what its total impact is on employees. Another thing that's going to be in our budget this year, and this is in the HR budget, Mara has set aside funds and plans to go through a process of looking for what I'll call HR software. I mentioned that we're going to hit an all-time high of the number of employees coming on board. We currently take paper applications. You can fax an application to us. You can fill out a PDF application. It's not without its hiccups, but it does definitely help. So we are looking at software that will allow us to receive applications in one format, to redact applications, to ensure that decisions are being made on who's the most qualified, not anything that may be inferred or biases that we might get from reading an application. And also once that employee gets on board, the software that or some of the software options that we've been looking at would also help with onboarding a new employee. So looking at that, what's the 30, 60, 90-day plan for someone who comes on board? How do we keep them here? How do we make sure they know what benefits they have? How do we make sure they know when you're going to have paid leave available to you? How do we make sure that they watch the safety videos and the training videos that they need to? So this would immensely help with an incredible amount of paper that's still being used. It would switch us to electronic records. And, frankly, I think the software would help us operate much more effectively. So Mara and our team will be working on that this year to look at finding software that's suitable, that meets our needs, and looks for us to improve many processes. Some of the other things that we're supporting this year too includes strategic plan facilitation. Believe it or not, when we come back here next year at this time, you're going to be looking at budgets that extend beyond the life of the current strategic plan. So we are looking at, our SPAC is embarking on a project soon to seek facilitation to help with community input, to look at how the strategic plan gets updated for future years. So that is on our radar as well. Overall, when you look at the numbers behind the administrative services budget and its many divisions, I would say that our budget is stable. The changes are primarily attributed to estimates for compensation, insurance, benefits, and pension contributions. We have had some changes from year to year, so it's just looking at what employees are currently enrolled at when we make that budget calculation. Many of the other changes in our budget are actually attributed to planning for training and planning for implementation of that software I mentioned, making sure that if we have software in place, we're trained on it and we know how to use it and implement it. We've got a few other things in there where over the years we've worked with the finance department to move some software subscriptions to the proper accounts and make sure they're recorded correctly. And so we've got some other anticipated increases in software and licensing. So that is the administrative services department in a nutshell. Happy to answer any additional questions you may have.
Mr. Kilberg.
Yeah, just one quick question. The HR software, is that going to include performance reviews as well?
The performance reviews, that was actually one of the things when we do this comp study, we wanted to look at the mechanism for how that is done and how it relates back to our quartile matrix for employee compensation. But anything that we can digitalize, we're certainly interested in doing.
That's all I had. Thank you.
Anyone else? Thank you, sir.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so next up we have the Finance Department, and with us this evening is Rita Cruz, our Finance Director.
Good evening, Rita.
Good evening. I'm here to talk today about the Finance Department, which is made up of 6 staff. We do a variety of things: utility billing, accounts receivable, which is money going in, accounts payable, money going out, debt management, investments, budget. We do a lot of help with the budget within every department in the city, including Stephanie, and also the audit. The Finance Department budget is spread between multiple funds, mainly water or general electric and water funds. The fiscal year 24 budget provides for training for all levels of staff to stay informed of finance and accounting changes and to create new efficiencies. The budget contemplates an online investment software. This software allows us to track and monitor almost 70 individual investments owned by the city instead of using 3 separate spreadsheets to manage those investments. In the past years, we've encouraged utility billing customers to go paperless and to use auto pay to reduce utility billing costs. For example, if you're a new customer applying online, you must opt in to receive a paper statement, and we send an auto pay form with your deposit. On average, we have 3 customers a week fill out an auto debit form and return it to us. Credit card fees are the single line in our item that is not under our control in regards to a customer perspective and a processor perspective. Customers have moved away from their to-go as being cash. Instead, they use our online portal, which allows them to make utility payments 24/7. We actually do see people making payments at 11:59 at night. So it is really used 24/7. It's pretty amazing. From a cost perspective, the city is in the process of implementing our ERP's credit card processor because they're going to stop supporting our current processor. In the commuter parking fund, credit card fees have increased because the commuters can now purchase their parking permits online. On to my department goals. This time next year, the council will see a different type of budget. In addition to the investment software, the department will be implementing an online interactive budget book with capital plan. The software will reduce multiple entries of data in the same data in separate sections to create the final budget book. As I'm talking about software, my favorite board, the Governmental Accounting Standards Board, now has a new requirement, which looks at these type of software agreements, long-term agreements that are going on an annual basis, which I think everyone in the budget, which Stephanie talked about last week, is a major thing going on right now. So as we did with leases, which we are implementing for next year, finance will reach out to the departments and discuss those. The city's financial policies were created in 2013 with some minor updates in the past few years. For fiscal year 14, I look to review and update those policies to current standards. The finance budget is presented tonight to allow the department to be aligned with the strategic plan. The budget as a whole is set to maintain the city's AA2 credit rating. This could not be achieved without assistance of the city administrator, department and division heads staying diligent and with their expenditures while maintaining excellent customer services.
Questions for our finance director or comments? Ms. Burkhart, Mr. Caven?
I just want to say I love that Rita has a favorite board, your favorite accounting. That's all I have to say.
It is the one that, it's a lot of sarcasm. It's the one thing that drives everything that we do. It makes decisions, it puts things on statements that are a little different, but yeah, it's my favorite.
Mr. Caven?
I didn't have any questions. I was just going to comment that was done very efficiently, and I think in probably less than about 4.5 minutes as well. So, thank you.
But if you look at just in general fund, I do have probably the smallest budget. Maybe David a little bit off, but as I said, utility billing, really all of those
Just
costs.
to clarify, you said David was a little bit off?
Yeah, a lot off. But really, I mean, a lot of my major costs are in utility billing, which are covered in the water and electric funds.
Mr. Kilberg?
Just one quick question. About how much are we, what's the total of our investments currently, roughly, between the three that you referenced?
I would have to go back and check. I'm doing the statements for next week.
Obviously, with interest rates increase, interest working
Yes.
in our direction here,
Yeah.
it's a significant improvement over last year.
It is, and I've been very aggressive in those investments because the interest rates are so positive. So I've actually kept a lot less cash on hand and done more short-term investing, because even if you go out and invest 3 months, it's actually a better interest rate in 3 months than what we would have gotten a year, like a year and a half ago. So I've been very proactive in moving it. I can get you the final numbers
That's great.
for the end of the month, but
Anyone else? Thank you very much.
thank you.
So next up, we have the Community Development Department with Director David DeGroot.
Hello, sir.
Thank you. Good evening. If my budget is smaller, I don't know that I'll be quite as efficient, but I will try to keep it short. Community development consists of 2 divisions. We have the building division and the planning division. In building, we have the responsibility of plan review, issuing permits, performing inspections, keeping up on property maintenance, code enforcement. We've had some changes in that division this year. We had Eric Nelson, our building commissioner, retire back in November. Brian Burns, our inspector at the time, was then promoted, and we're currently looking to fill that position. We've extended an offer. I believe that was accepted today. Mayor's gone. So hopefully that'll be filled soon. And looking at our numbers in the building division, we're really keeping pace with what we had going on last fiscal year in terms of number of permits, inspections performed, code enforcement contacts. And then in the planning division, we had a change this year as well. We had the addition of the assistant planner position that the council authorized last year. That has been a huge help for our division now that it's been about 6 months with him on board and kind of getting used to our processes. And in that division, we're also looking, we're keeping on pace with last year in terms of planning and zoning commission cases reviewed. Number of historic preservation commissions either administratively approved or going to the commission for consideration. In terms of budget impact, when we look at our operational budget, we're really not changing much from last year. So I thought my presentation could focus on the goals we've set for the division, the department, going into 2024. Our first goal is to review and evaluate the differences between the city's current adopted codes, specifically the International Code Council codes, the ICCs, and formulate a recommendation of the council regarding the adoption of the 2021 codes, including any local amendments we see appropriate. Right now, we have codes that are kind of vary year to year. We have the property maintenance code is from 2006. The building code is from 2009. Residential code, fuel and gas code, mechanical code, swimming, pool and spa code, those are all done in 2015. Energy conservation code is from 2018, so we're on different cycles for all the codes. And that's really not user-friendly for staff, for architects and other design professionals. So we're looking to review all those and try to get them all in the same cycle going forward. The second goal is the one that had an impact on the capital improvement budget, is to revise and update the city's comprehensive plan to include a sustainability component and consolidate the affordable housing plan, bikeway plan, downtown master plan, historic preservation plan, and southeast master plan. A little bit of background on this. Our goal for this current fiscal year was to kind of go through all those documents and assess where we're at in terms of achieving those goals and objectives and implementing the actions recommended in those plans. We are going through that process, and as we're doing that, I think we're seeing it makes more and more sense to maybe look at a comprehensive plan update and consolidate these. But we will ultimately bring that to the council for a policy discussion and your direction to either do that or to prioritize updates of certain plans or certain portions of plans. So this budget number of $250,000 could be what it is. It could be a little higher, it could be lower, depending on that scope of work that we define. As we were going through it, I mean, we have the comp plan was from 2003. The downtown and southeast area subplans, those were adopted in 2012, so it's been 10 years since those were done already. The bikeway plans from 2005. Historic preservation plan is from 2008. And the affordable housing plan, a little more recent because we have to update that every 5 years, is from 2020. Altogether, we have almost 400 pages to sift through, and all these different documents, some which conflict with each other or overlap on each other. And again, that's not user-friendly for staff, for elected officials, and for the general public and developers. So looking to kind of clean that up next fiscal year. We set the budget at $250,000 based on our experience with the downtown master plan. That was about $125,000 for just that sub-area plan. But we also reviewed published RFPs for comp plans in our surrounding communities and talked to some consultants we've worked with in the past to get an idea of what we should expect. The next goal is to research standards and regulations for accessory dwelling units, and present our findings to the committee of the whole for a policy discussion and seek direction whether or not to pursue those amendments and programs that would allow for accessory dwelling units. So think of an apartment above the garage or an in-law suite, something like that. And this goal directly relates to the strategic plan under economic vitality. Objective 1 reads, to maintain an economically healthy population through support of new housing opportunities and changes that may allow for greater variety of housing available to individuals at all stages of life and income levels. And we think that accessory dwelling units have the potential to do just that. So we want to take a deeper look at that and have a policy discussion with the council. Goal number 4 is to look at opportunities to streamline our processes, issuing building permits and completing inspections by eliminating paper, moving to an online platform wherever possible. So simple permits like a fence permit, a roof permit, something like that, these are things we can maybe streamline by online submittals and issuing permits over the counter. And if we can't do it online, maybe just training our permit techs to be able to do that without a building inspector being involved. And that goal is pretty self-explanatory, just part of our ongoing efforts to improve our efficiencies for the customer as well as for ourselves. Goal 5 is kind of along the same lines, but more specific to the planning and zoning applications we receive. We don't have an ability to fill those out and submit those online right now. We have fillable PDFs that you can email to us, but we don't have any software that kind of funnels that to us nicely. And often those applications are so big you can't just email them into us. And then the last goal is to establish and promote a conceptual review application process that would meet with the building commissioner and fire marshal to identify modifications that may be required to a project to comply with the city's adopted codes prior to submitting a permit application. And this is a service we historically provide upon request, but we find it very beneficial for the potential applicant as well as ourselves. So we're looking to put that into a more, I want to say a formal application, but we're looking to promote that service more and get that word out there so we can kind of move through tenant changes, property owner changes a little more quickly without kind of the back and forth of what are we going to need to do to make this a restaurant or an event space or whatever, to kind of get those questions answered early. That's really all I have. If we have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
From Mr. DeGroot, Mr. Kilberg?
Just a couple quick questions. How many are in your department, David?
We have 9. So we have
9 in your
2
department.
permit techs, building commissioner, code enforcement officer, building inspector, city planner, preservation planner, assistant planner, and myself.
There's one thing that wasn't included in this budget that you wish you had for the upcoming year. What would it be?
I don't know that I have an answer to that question. I think we have a full plate.
I
Yeah,
don't-
more time. Yeah, as always is.
I guess what I'm
but-
getting to is as far as staffing, it looks like there's an extensive list of responsibilities in your department, and I'm just wondering if we're adequately staffed, and if you were to, if you had a wish list, would it be additional staff?
Probably. I think the challenge with our department is sometimes an application comes in that we were not expecting, and it can become all-consuming, and it makes it hard to achieve some of these goals that we are working towards. So that part's always hard to gauge. I think the addition of the assistant planner has been a huge help, and as we move forward with the cross-training between Historic Preservation and Planning and Zoning Commission, that should free up some more time to work on these goals. But yes, always, I think more people would help us get through these special projects faster. Unfortunately, I don't know where we would put another person. Yeah. Thank you.
Anyone else? Thank you, Mr. DeGroot.
Thank you.
Good to see you.
Okay, next up is our Economic Development Department with our Director Kathleen Timoshenko.
Welcome, Kathleen.
Thank you. Economic development is responsible for developing and implementing strategies and programs to retain and expand the city, to attract development and investment. For the strategic plan workshop this year, there were rankings of 2 tiers of priorities. Economic vitality made both rankings. In the first tier, it was the second ranking. Develop a resilient local economy through the development of new commercial industrial opportunities that add to the city's tax base. In the second tier, it was the top priority. Encourage tourism by enhancing the city's image and better accommodating the needs of visitors. So our goals are reflective of your stated goals. So the first goal that we have is to work on public education information about Geneva's destination market to inform you in your policy decisions so that you can identify opportunities to expand the market in the future. We also will be working with property owners and staff members to reestablish SSA1 in order to create a comprehensive approach to address the conditions of the downtown streetscape. We are working to finalize the public-private partnership and funding mechanism to further the construction of the Southeast Industrial Park. We also are going to be working on a department strategic plan to make sure that we're properly in position to address future needs and demands related to the strong economic vitality goals that we have in our strategic plan. And then lastly, we're going to be working with the city administrator and the finance department to create and administer grant programs for funding of entities outside the city supporting tourism and economic development. There's just something I'd like to point out about one of our goals with the Southeast Master Plan. We get a lot of questions, and just recently David answered one over the weekend, or Friday rather, about how long the Southeast Master Plan is taking. And I just want to draw your attention to the numerous things that have occurred in the past 24 months to further the SEMP plan. So in June of 2020, the council authorized the city to submit for the Rebuild Illinois grants. So that was authorized in 2020. We just finalized our grant agreement, executed it in November 2022. And prior to that, we could not move forward on spending. But in that interim, we have brought 7 different things to the city council related to acquiring easements that would allow for utilities connections. A couple of those easement requests turned into annexations at the property owner's request, but those were all done at no cost to the city. So that's what's really been taking time in the past 24 months, and the project is very ripe now and ready to go, so that is a big goal that we share amongst the departments. I was also asked to mention a little bit about the community relations software that we're proposing in the budget. So business retention and expansion is, a major tenet of economic development and one of the pillars for making sure that you're talking to stakeholders. And right now we do this over a number of platforms. We have a lot of different spreadsheets, and we try to do outreach in different ways. And there's a lot more opportunities now to make our approach more uniform, to be able to communicate amongst our team and also with our businesses. And so we're looking at some of those opportunities to be able to streamline our data and also to be able to communicate more efficiently. There's some tools that allow you to send out surveys, to get information, to be able to, inform your actions. So we're looking at that, and we named it Community Relations Software because we're not sure exactly which one we would be recommending should this be funded. That's all I had.
Questions or comments for Kathleen? Mr. Kosaruk.
Just curious, how much the Rebuild Illinois grant was that you guys finalized?
1.2 million.
All right. Congratulations. That's great. Thank you.
We applied for 5.
Wow.
But we'll take what we can get.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you.
Mr. Kilbert.
Just, the MIF project looks very exciting. How's that syncing with our infrastructure and all the utilities and everything that's going to be required for that project to meet deadlines?
We do have a deadline in the Rebuild Illinois grant.
Okay.
And we believe that with all hands on deck, that we can work it through and meet the deadline. We have a developer that's anxious and ready to go. So we think that we're going to be successful. We know we're going to be successful.
So that's going to take up the majority of the site then, isn't it?
It will. It's over 200 acres.
Yeah.
There's a good deal of wetlands though.
Sure.
But yes, there's several development scenarios that they're working through dependent upon how the buildings lay out, but it will be pretty significant.
And then the other one would be the Bullock project, and I know that that's another one that has a lot of potential, and that you've been working with David on as well. What's the status there, and is that still trending in a positive direction?
It's definitely trending in a positive direction. The property owner is very committed to the site and working through some of the development questions with the staff. So that's definitely moving in a good direction.
And then I guess I asked David this question, I'll ask you too. What's on your wish list that it's not included in this budget that you would be, if you had additional funding, what would it be that you'd ask for?
Space. We definitely have, functionality issues and lack of space at City Hall,
Okay.
which is, I know we're working on that, but I would think that that's probably the thing I'd wish for the most.
And your department consists of you?
There's me and two others.
Okay.
We have a vacancy right now. Somebody who recently just left.
Okay.
So we have a vacancy, but we do have two business development analysts.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Thanks for your presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kathleen.
Okay, so next up is Police Chief Passarelli for the Police Department.
Hi, good evening, everyone.
Good evening, Chief.
The budget that's presented to you on behalf of the Police Department aligns with the city's strategic plan. It also allows us to remain a full-service police department, providing this current level of service to our community while meeting all of the mandates that the state is adding on to us. Kind of summarizing the year, we've had successes and challenges, I think, like every department. We saw several well-earned retirements from long-tenured employees. We saw new officers promoted. We added some new officers to replace those who had been promoted. We were able to be in the council chambers and recognize officers for some life-saving actions this year. So that was great. We did have slightly fewer calls this past calendar year. But what was kind of interesting about the year was we seemed to have calls that were more in-depth. We had more felony arrests than we have in the past. A traditional felony arrest takes 3 to 4 hours to process. And we had nearly 20 more DUIs than we had the year previously as well. And a typical DUI arrest is about 3 hours too. Officers made 1,000 more traffic stops this year than they had made last year. Some of that was a higher staffing level. A lot of it was, I think we've all seen some of the driving that is occurring. They're kind of post-COVID. So the officers have been very proactive in trying to address a large number of citizen complaints that we've received in regards to speeding. Our accidents were up somewhat too, about 5% from the year previously. So 774 accidents as compared to 739 the year before. We experienced some crime trends that a lot of communities in our area are experiencing. Some of the larger metropolitan areas, we seem to have some offenders come from those areas, the catalytic converter thefts that a lot of communities were facing, along with some burglaries and other types of things, where the offenders were tied back to bigger cities, which leads to more work for our detectives and effort in tracking those people down. Our PD budget is generally very similar to what last year's was. The big changes are mandates as they relate to the Safety Act, and that being the Body Camera Act. Each municipality in the state of Illinois has to enact body cameras. That's why you see such an increase in the cost there. We are technically mandated to go by 2025. However, with supply chain issues and everyone trying to do that at the same time, it's proving to be a 7 to 8 month wait to get the equipment. So I thought it was prudent to try and go now so that we can get ahead of that, because the state can limit the grant opportunities that we have along with federal funding if we're not in compliance with the act. This also includes switching the squad car cameras that we have in the squad cars to the same manufacturer of whatever we go with the body cameras. I think it's very important to have a seamless platform. that works the way that's supposed to, so that as the officers get in and out of their car, the cameras are smart enough to know which one to turn on, when to turn on. They're dealing with enough complex situations. I don't want them to have to worry about which button to push and when. And then squad cars are obviously another big one. We've talked a lot about supply chain issues. We just received a squad car we ordered in May of 2021 that's due to be converted at the end of the month. But that has certainly impacted, and where we would normally come to you and ask for new cars when we're hitting over 100,000 miles, these cars are now 150,000 miles and we still don't have their replacements. They operate 24/7. There's 20 different officers who drive those cars, all shapes and sizes, and they take a lot of wear and tear and a lot of abuse in that time. So we need to be able to keep up with that rotation. As far as our goals for the year, I'm going to be careful how I word the first one. But we want to research the viability of acquiring a police comfort dog. I think that's something that a lot of communities are implementing. I think in a community like ours, it can be extremely beneficial with the number of calls regarding mental health and other issues that may be occurring. I think it's a natural fit for us, but there's a lot of work to do to see how viable that would be for our community. We currently do an adult citizens police academy. I'd like to introduce a youth citizens police academy. I think it's important to be able to relate to the youth of our community and give them some insight into what the city offers and what the police department offers, and ideally use that as a recruiting tool as we go further down the road. We want to participate and evaluate the results of the Kane County Collaborative Diversion Program. What that allows is pre-arrest diversion for somebody who maybe doesn't need to be in the system the same way as others, and it allows them to get into a system where their needs can be met in a different way, and perhaps it keeps them out of the criminal justice system and allows them to receive the rehabilitation that they need. We want to innovate or implement a police innovation committee, and I think that's something we've talked a little bit about in the whole city, is trying to look at how we do things from our employees' perspective. What can we do better? What equipment would they like to see? They're the ones who are out there doing the job every day, and I think it's important to get that perspective. So we want to have kind of from the ground up getting those ideas. And then collaborate with the City of Geneva Communications Coordinator to produce some informational videos that we can disseminate to the community that include traffic safety, crime prevention, and other pertinent information depending what's going on throughout the year. Some of the challenges that we have faced and will continue to face this year is staffing. You've had an opportunity to meet a lot of our new officers. 65% of our officers who are on the street every day have been hired since 2019. So we have a really young department now. We've really flopped from the old guys like me to the young guys and girls. So that's a good thing. We have 5 officers who are eligible for retirement now. And we have 2 openings as of right now. I think you've all heard about the nationwide struggles to recruit for police officers. When I tested for Geneva years and years ago, there were 500 applicants. This last time there were 14. And other municipalities are experiencing the same thing. And so we're always evaluating ways that we can recruit and bring the best and brightest here. We found that our eligibility list, we get some really good candidates at the top, and then there's some fall off there a little bit. So we're continuing to work on that. The laws that are constantly coming our way, the Safety Act, the Mental Health Act known as CESA, that really change how we do our job. The CESA Act was pushed back till July, but that's a huge change to, that's a lot of the 988 and who answers the phone and when do they get routed to 911 and the police, and when do they get routed to social workers who come out and handle these calls. A lot to be worked out there and a lot of training that needs to happen. And then the Safety Act, of course, changes a lot of the things we do, a lot of mandated training. I don't think it's all bad by any stretch. I think body cameras are a great addition, quite frankly. I think they help the officers and they give you a different perspective on how things are done. Training, there's added hours that we have to have the officers go through. And when we have a young department, we have a set standard of training they need anyway, and now we're adding to that, which results in backfill on the street and having to pay some overtime. Technology, I don't know how you ever keep up with it, quite frankly. We found a lot with our detectives, they're investigating Bitcoin crimes and they're investigating incredible amount of fraud. And they do a phenomenal job, but it takes a lot of time and a lot of technology and a lot of effort. But we'll do our best to continue to stay on top of that. Our facility, I think, is again, like Kathleen said, we're working towards a better direction, but that has been a challenge with a lot of continual repairs. Supply chain, we talked about the cars. Everything takes longer to get here, and I think a lot of the department heads are running into it. It's very difficult to get 3 quotes anymore, or someone who will come out and look at anything and offer it up. So we've had to adjust to how that looks. And then, of course, maintaining the safety and security of the community. It's a very desirable community, and we're doing the very best, and we'll continue to put everything we have to keeping it the way that it is. So I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Mr. Kilberg.
Just,
Mr. Kosrow. No, oh, sorry.
okay, for the benefit of the community, what is it going to cost Geneva for body cameras? Because this isn't a funded mandate.
Correct. It's unfunded, and it's I think we've budgeted
about a quarter
little over $70,000 a year
for the next.
For the next, well, it's infinitely. I mean, yeah,
ongoing.
Ongoing. It'll be something that we won't be able to do away with. So
Does everyone in the department get a body camera?
Yes,
okay,
they would.
so.
Because anytime you're engaged in police activity, you have to have it on and be able to turn it on. And there's always those, even the administration that leaves the building for certain calls for service, and we would have to have it available.
So that would be the majority of your 46 employees and.
Correct.
Yeah.
37 sworn total. Yep.
Thank you. Good report.
Thank you. You're welcome. No good. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief.
Okay, from one chief to the next. Next up is Chief Antonori with the Fire Department.
Hi, Chief.
Good evening, thank you. So my short story starts with our program. The Geneva Fire Department provides fire suppression, advanced life support, emergency medical response, basic and advanced rescue, hazardous materials mitigation, fire inspections, plans review, public education, fire investigations, emergency preparedness planning, response to the citizens, employees, and visitors of Geneva. So a true all hazards department. And we talk a lot about fire, but there's a lot more to it than that. The proposed budget that we have in front of you will allow us to continue to meet the strategic needs of both the City of Geneva and the Geneva Fire Department and the goals. The budget is assembled to accomplish both operational strategic plans and goals for the upcoming year, support the processes that we've agreed to. Just a little metrics. So we had our busiest year in our history. We responded to 2,921 calls, which is 190 or 6.9% above last year. This is broken down to about 68% of our calls are emergency medical based, and 32% are fire and rescue and accidents and calls for service, and the water heater broke in the middle of the night, doesn't know what to do, that type of thing. So
sorry about that call, Chief.
It's okay. Highest number of responses, I said, and we've done that safely and efficiently for the year. Our goals, commentary, are some of our major goals continuing this year is a conversion to a new records management system. We have a 20-year-old system that is about giving up the ghost. This digitization is going to convert us from more paper to almost all electronic. Efficiency, it'll be web-based, cloud-based. We'll be able to do our work from remotely now in the field with pads. And we believe a better delivery of ultimately our services to the community, whether it's doing inspections to businesses where we can have a report ready to go and emailed before we leave, to updating our records. We'll continuing the accreditation process. We'll be re-imaging the strategic plan this year and also our standards of cover and our risk assessment, which helps drive how we deploy our resources. We're upgrading our community EMS. Last year we added a new UTV to reach hard to reach places, trails, community events, sporting events, the new running track. And this year our goal is to advance it to advanced life support, cardiac monitors, everything such as similar to what you saw on the happened to that football player on the field, where we'd have the ability to do that at the football games. And then we're going to continue to try to find innovative ways to reduce our energy footprint, both consumables and purchase energy for the city. A couple of highlights of our capital investment that support that. Our station alerting system. This is what rings the bell traditionally in the middle of the night, makes us up and has us go on a call, is now over 50 years old. Some parts maybe 60. It is virtually every night we give it a little prayer that it continues to run. We'll be replacing that over the next, I year with a more modern, sleep safe. In other words, instead of bolting you awake, it'll gradually wake you up, and more information on the walls. So when you get up and you don't know where you're going, you can see that. Boat 2 replacement, supply chains has delayed this, but we're hoping this year that boats are actually going to be made again and we can buy one. Turnout gear dryer. We've gone from hardly ever washing our turnout gear to washing it after every call now for safety. Now we have to improve our drying versus laundry lines in the station. Car 213 replacement. The busyness of the fire marshal and the different duties necessitates a larger vehicle, and this is going to allow us to investigate the probability of using an EV vehicle for the first time in the fire department. So the fire marshal would have a plug-in that would, since he works during the day, and we could plug that in at night, so that helps meet multiple goals. Security cameras. We have a secure facilities. We don't have any cameras outside watching people, so we're working on that. And then another long due investment. Both the Public Works and the Geneva radio systems are over 40 years old. Functionality is low, so we're working together on a project to replace those with a new digital system, improve our community communications. Some of our continuing items of note. We have a younger workforce too, increased turnover, and this is driving the investment into training and the needs for that. Training classes are more numerous and they cost a lot more than they used to, so we're making investments there. There's increased competition for our part-timers, both becoming career firefighters somewhere else in other locations, so we're going to continue working on aggressive hiring and try to combat some of that loss. Building maintenance needs, buildings age, and then supply chain, both time, availability, and costs are all a challenge that we've all faced. And I think that was it for my prepared remarks. Any questions?
Thank you, Chief. Any questions from the dais or comments?
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so last but certainly not least, but now that everybody's been worn down a bit, we have our Public Works Director, Rich Babica. So this is streets, fleet, engineering, GIS, water, wastewater, electric, and is that it? I think I covered them all.
Yeah, pretty much nailed it.
How you doing,
So,
Rich?
I'm well. Thank you for asking. The Public Works Department. So, what do we do? You've already heard from everybody else, all my other counterparts. So we do everything else, and we support everybody else with what we do. So we
Any
provide,
questions or comments?
moving on. We provide technical reviews for community development. We provide technical assistance to economic development as they seek to bring in new developers. We provide everyday vehicle maintenance to police and fire. We actually had one of their engines in our shop today. We maintain and run the cemetery, which a lot of people tend to forget that the city owns 2 cemeteries and are active. We manage the wastewater fund in conjunction with the finance department. Public Works is the largest department the city has. We have 56 full-time employees. Of those 56 employees, we have 3 current openings, which include the Assistant Director of Public Works, a lineman position, and also a fleet manager or fleet supervisor. Looking at the staffing levels within the department, some kind of interesting stats that have popped up in my mind. I've been with the city just over 9 years, or I'm actually starting my 9 years. So in the 9 years I've been here, 18 employees have been added to the department. Now they've replaced employees that have retired, employees that have moved on to other agencies, or employees that have left both on their own or with a little encouragement. That's 32% of my workforce has been hired under my tenure. Probably one that shocked me a little bit more is that of the 56 positions, and of course those percentages are going to go up when we add the other 3 employees, 9 have been hired since COVID. So we brought on 9 employees in a post-COVID or active COVID world. Brian Davids, the city engineer, was hired 2 weeks before COVID shut everything down. And we had no idea what to do with Mr. Davids. Luckily, he had a well-versed background in wastewater treatment, so he went out and assisted the wastewater team in making sure their facility stayed up and operational during a very trying time. The department is broken into 4 divisions, and each division is broken down into subsections. The city administrator already covered that, so I'm not going to go through that. And our goals are listed within the budget on pages 122 through 128. And our capital requests are shown between pages 100 and 107, along with everybody else. It is a very aggressive capital program that the city is undertaking. We are in the process of transitioning the city into a leader of the community. I can tell you unequivocally that we are one of the leading communities right now in the state of Illinois with the lead line replacement, with our first projected water main lead line replacement program starting in 25. We actually just had a kickoff meeting for the design for that program. So we are leading the way. Geneva is leading the way, at least in communities of our size. But it's not just about capital projects. There are everyday projects that we run that maybe the community forgets about. One of the projects that we're taking on this year is developing an expansion of SSA 11 to include the bent tree landscape buffer. It's near and dear to some people in this room, but it's also important to the community. And we have been working with community development and the finance department to have that, and we actually have our first interview scheduled for tomorrow with a consultant. One of the next big things that is going to consume a lot of the available oxygen in the room next year is going to be, or even into this year, is the East State Street right-of-way acquisition. We have been talking about this project in one form or another since 2002. I just received the executed intergovernmental agreements that were adopted by the City Council from the state of Illinois last week. They are now in the vault, and we are now in the process of preparing to acquire the necessary parcels up and down East State Street. Just a reminder how complicated the East State Street project is. It involves 4 different grants. It involves 2 TIFs that are managed by Administration, Finance, Economic Development, and then it also includes the infrastructure fund. There's also expenditures in there within the capital outlay of the electric utility and the water utility. So there are 5 significant funds that are all contributing to the construction of East State Street, which, when we accomplish all the land acquisition over the next 12 months, will be scheduled for construction in calendar year 24 and 25. Some of the other things we're working on, we do a lot of joint ventures with other agencies. One such joint venture is City of St. Charles, where we're doing the reconstruction of Couts Road from Longest Drive, which is just north of Route 38, all the way to Commerce. The roadway will be reconstructed into a 3-lane truck route. It also has several grants that are being utilized and includes land acquisition also that we're currently in the process of doing. That is also scheduled for this summer, 23 and 24. One project that was moved up unexpectedly due to an unfunded mandate, which the city administrator briefly touched upon last week, is the fuel system upgrades at the Public Works building. In addition to, or one of our other many support functions we provide to the city is being the primary fuel source for the city, managing the fuel program. They are underground storage tanks. The state has provided another unfunded mandate for some secondary containment inside one of the components. And in order for us to build that secondary containment, we pretty much had to take the underground tanks out of the ground, which was something we were looking at doing and upgrading that fuel system in the future. So that has greatly accelerated that program. It is what it is, but it's something we're going to do. We are also, speaking of joint ventures, we are working on upgrading the water and sanitary systems on Division Street. Division Street is a very interesting location between our 2 agencies. There are 2 water mains, there are 2 sanitaries, and there's 1 storm system, and there's 1 roadway. city of Geneva owns the roadway, but we have St. Charles water main and Geneva water main. And it took several years just to determine what services were tied to which water main. So we are very confident now that all our residents are tied to our water system and all the St. Charles residents are tied into their water system. I know that sounds crazy, but it was a lot of field verifications to ensure that because we didn't know, so we had to make sure that happened. But that is scheduled for, we are doing the design phase for our water main this year, and then we are going to do construction in calendar year 24. That is something you may notice as you look through the capital projects. Something that we are doing, changing our philosophical approach, and this has a lot to do with the studies that we have recently completed, is that you will see engineering fees dedicated to the design phase. So we will be designing projects this year, and then they will be scheduled for construction in the following year as budget resources allow. And that is one way that we're being more efficient and more effective with the resources that are entrusted to us. One other project that we are also working on with St. Charles, although in a very superficial way, is that this year we will be replacing a segment of water main on Route 25 from Route 38 to Jefferson. It is a 100-year-old water main, and it has had a couple of events recently. I'm very superstitious with the words I use. But that will necessitate the closure of Route 25. And we have been working with St. Charles and IDOT that once that detour is set up, St. Charles is also going to have a detour or a closure for a sanitary sewer crossing outside their main public works facility. And then immediately following that, there is also a culvert that needs to be replaced in St. Charles. So we will be utilizing the same detour. And while it will be a very inconvenient period of a couple months while these three projects are done, it's going to be much more convenient than start and stop, driving people crazy, which we do a pretty good job doing all on our own. Speaking of equipment, so this has also been brought up by my counterparts. One of the biggest challenges that we're facing is the material delivery of components. Some of the equipment that's in the current budget is not going to be delivered until the staff that is using that will no longer be with the city because they have probably retired. It's not a joke. Some equipment we're being promised is going to take 4 to 5 years before it's delivered. It is mind-boggling. I've been doing this for 30 years and I have never, ever encountered anything like this. We had a main frontline plow truck that sat for 6 months because one of the sensors in its diesel fuel emission system had shorted out, and it took 6 months to get the component shipped to us. It's just recently been put back into service. It literally sat, it couldn't even start without that sensor. Some of the other projects that we're going to be working on, again, I'm trying to keep this very high level. Third rail construction, which is currently underway. Lovely little project with the Union Pacific. Also tends to take the oxygen out of the room when there's an issue. The refuse and recycling contract. The current contract expires in July of this year. We have been working with our counterparts in Batavia. We will once again be issuing bids for this project. They are not going to be joint bids, so there will be 2 bids issued at the same time with the hope and intent that it will attract better unit prices. We have asked if St. Charles was interested, and they have declined at this time to participate. We also have our stormwater and MS4 permits are up for renew this summer. And there is expected to be new unfunded mandates through those. So we've seen what other agencies and other states have done, and that Illinois tends to follow them. So we're already looking at trying to pre-plan for those. And then the current latest issue that we're trying to wrap our hands around that Administrative Services, particularly Mayor Johnson, has been exceptionally helpful with us in Public Works, is something called the ELDT CDL training program. So that is the entry level driver training program. And the easiest way I can describe it is it is a preschool for employees before they're even allowed to take the driver's permit test, before they're allowed to take the driver's field test to operate a CDL truck. And it is an unfunded mandate, and it ranges anywhere. Well, we've actually found a very lucrative, Mayor Johnson assisted in securing a very lucrative program for the city, but it still runs about $500 per preschool applicant to take a test before they can even go to the Secretary of State's office to take the written test, before then they can take the driving test. So just another kind of one of those crazy things that we deal with on a day-to-day basis that if we're doing our job right, none of you ever hear about. Any questions?
Questions from Mr. Babica, Mr. Marks.
Are you going to sleep at all this year? I mean, no, seriously, that's a very, very aggressive capital program. I mean, I guess I'm not sure how we're going to get through it all.
Well, likewise with the other departments, the city of Geneva is extraordinarily blessed with the talent that it has. That is something that does keep me up at night, though, is keeping that talent. We have highly dedicated, highly motivated teams that are professional. And we do use a number of consultants to help us with these projects. But it is a challenge, and some of this is a challenge because we're trying to make up for lost ground from COVID. And when COVID first hit, we shut everything down because we didn't know what the impacts of the economy were going to be. And then in the first year of the recovery, again, we took a very, very conservative approach with our projects because, again, we didn't know what the effects were going to be. And now that things seem to have stabilized through with the local economy, we can start moving forward. But yeah, there's a lot of things that have all piled up at the same time.
Yeah. Do you have any ranking? I mean, I just can't believe you're going to get through them all. And it's not because of lack of effort. Don't get me wrong. But I mean, roadblocks come in the way of other governmental agencies. Let's put it that way. That, I mean, just acquiring the land up and down East 8th Street. I mean, that is a tremendous amount of work for a year.
Yeah, the whole purpose of the IGA that the city entered into with IDOT was to allow IDOT to use its quick take authority to streamline that process. From a priority perspective, see, I don't know if you all remember a couple meetings ago I talked about, like, I have 2 kids between the 2 utilities.
Yeah,
And they're
I remember that.
fighting with each other. Well, I have 4 because the engineering division is going to say unequivocally that East 8th Street's the priority for the city.
Yeah.
Bob Van Geska, my wastewater superintendent, is going to say unequivocally that the solids handling improvement is the #1 project for the city. Kathleen would kill me before I left this room if I didn't say that SEMP was the unequivocal #1 priority for the city.
You're getting daggers right now.
Yeah. There's a number. I know. And they all have equal treatment, and they're all equally critical, and they've all equally been called out by the city council and strategic planning. So, yeah, it's going to be a very streamlined summer. It is going to be a very streamlined year, and it's going to go quick. And that is one of my biggest fears. That also keeps me up at night. Is keeping this momentum going. How long can we keep this momentum going? Because of those 56 employees, I would be remiss, because I promised him that I would say his name so it was etched in history forever, that Kirk Lamberg, our purchasing agent, a significant veteran of the city, is retiring on March 3rd of this year. So that is going to be a great loss that we're going to have to overcome. Besides Kirk Lamberg, I have 5 other senior employees that can retire within the next 12 months. Certainly within the next 18 months. And then there's another cadre of 5 to 7 people after that. What am I afraid of? I'm afraid that the employees that we have identified for succession planning, that the city has spent a considerable amount of resources to prepare them to move forward to fill these positions, is going to become acquired by other agencies.
Yeah.
We've had 2 other employees that have already become superintendents at other agencies simply for that reason. So yeah, that's something that keeps me up at night is how long can we keep this momentum going and how can we retain our staff? And that's where the assistant city administrator and Mara again come in to come up with ideas for employee retainage. It's all tied in. We're none of us are independent. It's all one big Celtic knot, even though I'm German and Polish. So.
Okay.
Mr. Kilberg.
I think this has been very helpful. I mean, I think we've taken about an hour, a little over an hour, to go through this. I think it's helpful not only for the council to have this collective review of our 23 plans, but I think it's also helpful for the community that behind the numbers there's a story to be told. And obviously our department heads are very busy. I think the big challenge that came through tonight is staffing and making sure that we're competitive looking to the future and being able to fill key positions because of the number of retirements and everything that's happening in the marketplace at the present time. But again, thank you to all of you for taking the time to go through this exercise. Hopefully you felt it was worthwhile. I think it's a good summary going into the new year.
Anyone else? Thank you, Rich.
Thank you.
Anything you want to add, Stephanie? Anything else for the benefit of the special committee of the whole? Mr. Caven?
Like new business?
Yes, sir.
I just want
More budget questions in general? Yeah, I mean, yeah. If there's no budget questions, then go to the new business.
Okay. I just wanted to give a quick shout out. I know everybody that's in this room already knows, but this week is Restaurant Week in Geneva. If you and your family are able, try to get out and support one of our local restaurants. We're very fortunate to have so many fantastic options. So if you're able to, get out there and try to support one. Thank you.
Mr. Kilberg.
I know that we have the 31st available if there needs to be further budget discussions. I'm fine with the budget as it's presented. I don't know where the rest of the council is. Yeah, I think you need some type of an indication this evening on that.
To know whether or not you want to schedule next Monday, the 30th.
Yeah,
I mean the 30th, excuse me.
that was going to be my last request. Is there any
Oh,
desire?
I'm sorry.
That's okay. Is there any desire for a continuation of discussion regarding the proposed budget for next Monday, the 30th? Okay. Our next regularly scheduled council meeting, of course, and committee of the whole meeting is February the 6th, which I believe is Tom Brokaw's birthday. Is there a motion to adjourn? Mr. Marks makes the motion. All in favor of adjourning, please say aye.
Aye.
We're adjourned, folks. Thank you again.